Hi class, this is lesson 33. This is the literature part 1, and we are taping for the last time. This will be it for this year, and today's lesson of course is on Ivanhoe. So next week, after you've taken the Zoom class, either on Tuesday or Thursday, you can start your exam. You'll take the exam and decide if you're going to take just the Julius Caesar portion or if you'll include the Ivanhoe. I'd encourage you to do whatever you feel like doing. You can do either one. The Ivanhoe is optional, but I think a lot of you would do well on the Ivanhoe, and I know it's a very powerful book. And of course, these notes, which you've been taking, are notes that will be on the test. So I'd encourage you to do it, but whatever you have decided to do in the situation of this coronavirus, I know that that's been maybe making some families decide not to do that, and that's fine. We give you that option. So today we're going to talk about the character of some of the people in Ivanhoe. Go ahead and number or date your page, either May 7th or May 9th. And let's go ahead and make sure that we take notes on this. We want to start with one of the major characters. So you'll go into your characters section, and one of your major characters, of course, is Prior Eimer. And Prior Eimer is a Catholic abbot. He's a prior, meaning he is in charge of a monastery. And so a monastery, of course, is where a lot of monks live. And as you can tell, he is corrupt. He thinks in several ways. He puts great value on his clothes. You would never know that he was necessarily a monk. He's got expensive clothes, his rings on his finger, jewelry, his values. Jewelry. Just a very showy, worldly type of person. Very worldly. And he is also desiring of power. He likes his position in the church. So we would say that while he claims to be surrendered to Christ and living a life submitted to the Lord, he's also very much involved in the world, comparing himself in wealth and riches. And we would say he would be a model of hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. So a hypocrite is a person that says one thing and does another, and that would certainly be his position. So we have Prior Eimer. Now another thing that we want to uncover, I guess we can underline Eimer, is that the Saxons, and as we look at their character, they are also very prideful. Of course, the Bible says pride is the root of all other sins, and so we got Cedric, who is extremely prideful of his being a Saxon. We have Athelstane, who is got relatives, his descendants are Saxon. He's very proud of it. And of course, Ivanhoe, and another very proud to be a Saxon, but also very compassionate. As we see, he shows great mercy to Isaac of York. He shows great gallantry to both Rebecca and also to his girlfriend, Rowena, who is the ward of Cedric. So the Normans seem to have their flaws as well. The Normans, of course, what would we say? Well, certainly after power. Certainly they desire money. You see that with their pursuit of Isaac. They want the land. In fact, they've taken over the land and said it all belongs to them. And so they're hated by the Saxons because they've taken away all the Saxon land. And they desire beauty. And you see de Bracy in his pursuit of Rebecca, who he thinks is lovely. And of course, you see in the opening scenes, really, of the story at the banquet there at Rotherwood, you see Brian de Bois Gilbert and his staring at the lovely Rowena and just kind of staring at her and being amazed at her beauty. So you see that. Let's see, I think Prince John is another who desires wealth and beauty and, of course, his position. Brian de Bois Gilbert. We see that with Front-de-Bœuf. And we see that with de Bracy. So we see various bad character qualities shown here. Now, which characters, here's a good question, as we think of it, which characters show wisdom? And that's kind of the theme today, is wisdom. Wisdom is the correct decisions made with knowledge, the wise use, the prudent use of knowledge. Well, how about with Rebecca? As we think of Rebecca, I'd like you to think of, okay, how are ways that she shows wisdom? How about Locksley? Locksley is Robin Hood, right? He's the archer, the great archer who wins the prize, splitting the arrow during the archery event at the great tournament at Ashby de la Zouche. Okay, how about the Black Knight? As we think of the Black Knight, and Black Knight ends up being Richard, the lion-hearted, who has come back from the Holy Land. How does the Black Knight show wisdom? We also have Tuck, Friar Tuck, who is the monk of Copmanhurst. How does he show wisdom? And Ivanhoe, we'll just pick him as well. How does Ivanhoe demonstrate wisdom? So let's kind of think about these people. Let's take a couple minutes and just talk about Rebecca. Her great wisdom, great knowledge of medicine, doesn't she? Knowledge of herbs and medicine. She, we would call that the healing arts. The healing arts. How else does she show wisdom? Well, she resists Brian de Bois Gilbert. She pushes him away. And in fact, she makes it very clear she has no interest in a relationship with him. She sees into the heart. I'm gonna just put down here, she has a great internal. She looks at the internal heart of a person. She looks at Ivanhoe and sees that great heart to serve and the courage that Ivanhoe shows as well. So I'm going to put the next one, Locksley, down here. How about Locksley? How does Locksley show wisdom? Well, he's the one who handles Girth and Wamba, doesn't he? He handles Girth and Wamba very well and shows great skill. He handles his men. He's a leader, so he shows skill and wisdom in leading his men in the forest. So he commands respect. He is certainly shows great respect, partly because he is so skillful at archery, but he's also because he looks after their welfare. So he puts the welfare of others. And I would say this, I think historically, when you look at generals or great leaders or presidents, or even one of my heroes is Booker T. Washington, who was a great college president of Tuskegee. And you see in all these cases a desire for the welfare of their people. They really are looking past their own desires to the welfare of others, and they really give of themselves. So Locksley, I think, is an example of that. Let's look at the Black Knight next as we consider some of the character qualities of the Black Knight. Okay, so I'll pull this, Black Knight. And of course, this is Richard, and some of you know that he was well loved. Richard I, the Lion-Hearted, was well loved by the English, even though he was Norman. Isn't that interesting? So though he was Norman, they still loved him. So he hides his, I think he shows wisdom in that he hides his true identity. Now, interesting, a good question would be why? Why does that show wisdom? Why does that show wisdom? And that would be a good question on the test, wouldn't it? Explain how the Black Knight shows wisdom. So he doesn't just charge in, he actually holds back his identity. Of course, he is a strong leader and shows much courage. I think he's a good example. His time that he spends with the monk, who is Friar Tuck, who's also called the clerk of Copmanhurst. So he spends a fruitful time there hearing about the conditions of the area and learning about it. He's been away. So you see that he does a careful reconnaissance as he comes back into his realm. He finds out what's been going on. Now, Friar Tuck, the clerk of Copmanhurst, he saves Isaac. So why would saving Isaac be a good idea? Well, Isaac has great value, doesn't he? I mean, he's got great worth, and he's being roasted there. So Friar Tuck puts his own life on the line and goes in and he saves Isaac. So he risks his life for this Jewish man, and he saves him. So a good example of character there, isn't it? How about Ivanhoe? As we study him, what an interesting figure he is. Wow. He hides his identity, just as the Black Knight does. But his identity comes out at the tournament there at Ashby de la Zouche. And so he cares for Isaac. He takes care of Isaac. He protects Isaac and shows him mercy. Think back when Isaac was going to get robbed by the Norman servants, the horsemen that accompanied Brian and Eimer. So he shows him mercy. He gives him mercy. Mercy is favor that you don't deserve. So Isaac hadn't done anything to deserve it, but he shows him mercy. Kind of has a heart for the weaker individual, someone that people are picking on. Okay? And I think that's something that's important about Ivanhoe. He looks at the heart. He considers the heart of the person very, very important. And he is a protector of the weak. He protects the weak. So I think we see a lot of excellent character development in Ivanhoe. Now let's turn over to plot. There's a lot to learn here as we look at character and now as we look at the plot. So if you would flip over to the plot. And I'd like you to make notes from the following questions, okay? And I'm not going to write these down. I'm going to let you write them down on your paper and then take some notes and think about it. Here's the first question, so get ready to write this down. Now you should have this under the plot section. How does Rebecca come to trial? What was the reason? How does Rebecca come to trial? What was the reason? So take a couple minutes and write down what you remember. And number 2, who desires to be her champion? Who desires to be her champion? At what price? At what price does this person become her champion? Number 3, who becomes her champion? What is his motive? Okay. Who becomes her champion? What is his motive? Now remember, there's 2 people that really seek to be her champion there at the end. Now there's this combat. Who wins the trial by combat? Explain how this happens and why is it unexpected? Okay. Now if you haven't read quite this far, that's okay. Write the question down and you can answer it later after you read that section. Okay. So don't worry if you haven't read it yet, because you will, and you can write this down. So last time, who wins the trial by combat? Explain how this happens and why it is unexpected. Now the last series of questions is kind of what happens. Now you'd have to have read to the end, so this is our last session. We're not going to read to the very end, but some of you have. I know a couple have told me that they've read, but you will read. Some of you will read and finish it up next week. So here's the last series of questions. Ready? What happens to Ivanhoe? What happens to Rebecca? To Athelstane? To King Richard I? Now let's go to character. So I'm just going to put here answer all of these questions for plot. Okay, and you just write them there in your book. Okay, and that's fine. Right there in your notes. Okay, maybe skip a couple spaces. Let's for those answers. Now let's go over to the character section. And let's put down what is the cause of conflict between Norman and Saxon. And I would encourage you to think the cause of the conflict goes back to 1066 AD and the Battle of Hastings. So what is the thing that's happened and it's causing this conflict? Okay. Now, as you think of the character there, that's going to affect the character of the Saxons and the character of the Normans. The Normans have conquered the Saxons. So they have a conqueror's mentality, don't they? The Saxons are the losers. They've lost their land, they've lost their freedom, they've lost even their language. Remember, the book even talks about how French language now has taken over so many areas of England, and the English can't even speak it. So they've lost in that. Well, let's take a look at the church now. The church, the character of the church, and the main person that we know this from is Eimer, right? Prior Eimer. And we would say that the church is filled with hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. It is very full of wealth, and it is full of power. And often you see people like Prior Eimer very jealously guarding his position. He's very interested in that. We could also take a look at the Saxons, couldn't we? The Saxons here. What is the character of the Saxons? Well, we mentioned earlier the pride. Great. And I think a love of liberty is also quite obvious and evident. Now we're going to go our next tape now, so we'll go to part 2.